notice that I wanted to find the absolute value of negative 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's negative 7. Well, how far away from 0 is negative 7? Well, it turns out that this distance here is 7, and this distance here is also 7. So when I look at absolute value, I am seeing how far did I actually walk. I can't actually walk negative feet. I could take 7 steps forward and 7 steps backwards, and I would end up at the same place, because whether I move forward 7 feet or backward 7 feet, I've gone the same distance. That's why the absolute value of a positive or a negative ends up with the same number. So that brings me over here. If I'm taking the absolute value of x, I don't know what number it is inside that absolute value. I know that it equals 7, but I don't know if x was negative 7 or was x positive 7. Well, when I'm looking at the absolute value of x, I have to write both answers. I would say x equals negative 7 and positive 7. Those are the two answers that are possible for this equation. It could have been, because if I plug in negative 7 over here into my equation, absolute value of negative 7 is 7, so that would be true. If I plug 7 in, the absolute value of 7 is 7. So this right here, those are my solutions. Notice there's more than one. So let's look at, what does that mean if I'm looking at solving an equation? Let's start with this first one. If I want, so we're looking right here, I want to solve for x, and it's in the absolute value. The first thing I need to do is isolate it on one side of the equation, meaning I want the only x terms on this side of the equation. So I'm going to start by subtracting 2 from both sides, and I'm left over here on the left with the absolute value of x, and over here with 5. So what are my possible solutions? What numbers could I plug right in there for x and have it equal to 5? Well, there are two answers. Remember that the distance from 0 to positive 5 is 5, so that distance right there is 5. But the distance, 2, 3, 4, 5, over here to negative 5 is also 5. So I could either choose x equals positive 5 or x equals negative 5. Both of those answers would be correct. So that one is pretty straightforward. But what do I do if I have something like this, where there is a number being added to x inside the absolute value? Well, I don't know what x is, but I know when I add x plus 2 together, either x plus 2 added up to 7, or x plus 2 added up to negative 7, and then I took the absolute value. So this part in here has two potential answers. It could have added up to be a positive 7, or it could have added up to be a negative 7. So I'm going to have to solve both of these equations, which I can do. These are simple equations. So I just subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals 5, or if I subtract 2 from this one, I get x equals negative 9. So my two answers would be 5 or negative 9. So let's plug those back in and see. If I plug in 5 plus 2, what's the absolute value of 5 plus 2? Well, it's 7. What if I plug in, let me plug in the 9 now. If I plug in the negative 9. Negative 9 plus 2. So I just plugged negative 9 right in there. That equals negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7. Oops, sorry. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7, and the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. So both of those answers are correct. Take a minute and solve these two absolute value equations and see how you do. All right, so if I were going to be solving the first one, I'm going to start, because x is all alone inside the absolute value, I'm going to start by subtracting 3 from both sides so that I get that x all by itself. I end up with 2 equals the absolute value of x. Well, what two numbers could I plug in right there and still end up with 2? Well, if I think about my number line, how far it is from 0, 2 is 2 spaces from 0. And negative 2 is also 2 spaces from 0. So my two answers would be x equals 2 or negative 2. That's the set of answers that would make this a true equation. Okay. On number 6, it's a little bit trickier because remember, we're going to look at this stuff inside. We don't know if 2x minus 8 was positive 16, and then you took the absolute value to get 16, or if it was 2x minus 8 was negative 16, and then you took absolute value to get the positive 16. So I'm going to have to solve both of these equations. So I'll add 8. I get 2x equals 24. Divide 2. And x equals 12. For this one, I'd add 8, and I get 2x equals negative 8. Divide by 2 and get x equals negative 4. So in this case, my two answers that I've come up with are 12 and negative 4. Now I want to check if those are correct. So I'm going to plug in right here. I'm going to plug 12 in for that x. So that would give me 2 times 12 minus 8. What is that? That's 24 minus 8, which is 16. If I take the absolute value of 16, check. That one worked out. So now let's plug in the negative. Let's plug in negative 4 right there for x. If I did that, I'd give 2 times 4 minus 8. So that would be, 2 times negative 4. Gotta be careful with my negative signs. So that's negative 8 minus 8, which equals negative 16. If I take the absolute value of negative 16, I also get 16. So both of those answers will satisfy our original equation.